everyone, and welcome to Capes, Cowls Masks, the show where we uncover the world of soups and science fiction. I'm your host, Jake Hart. I'm a podcaster, sound designer, and a writer for Fresh Take Hub, and today I'm joined by my fellow co-host,
David Oscar. I am a editor over on Fresh Take Hub, also a podcaster and writer.
Yes, good to be back on the show, Dave. This is going to be our weekly news show, as always, breaking down and discussing the biggest news stories that have hit the web and the stands. And, of course, we've got our pull list at the end. Unfortunately, Tom is not with us this week, so I will be taking over the duties of the pull list this week. So you're going to get my taste in comics for once. But in respect, it's very similar to Tom's. But, Dave, what have you been up to this week? What have you been watching, or have you been a bit too busy to be watching some stuff?
It's a bit of a mix of everything. I suppose it has been a busy time. I have, let's think, what have I been watching? I did, recently I wanted to get a start on a show called The Plot Against America, because I was a big fan of Man in the High Castle, and I think it's the same author of that original series, and I'm kind of into that like alternate history kind of stuff. So I started that. It's got a limited time on Now TV for some reason, which I never understand why they do all that kind of stuff. Like, oh, you only have 14 days to watch it. And I'm like, why? It's like Sky Atlantic HBO stuff. I don't understand why it keeps going on and off there all the time. But again, that's a different conversation. So I started that. That was interesting. So I just need to sort of continue with that. I also watched actually the first episode of Marvel 101, was it, with the Japanese Spider-Man?
Oh, 616.
616.
Yeah. Where'd you
Same thing.
101.
616. I was just thinking of like informational kind of stuff, like giving you the 411, I suppose. I don't know. Yeah, so that was fun because it kind of tied into a lot of stuff that I've been watching recently, like watching like the kaiju Japanese sort of stuff, then watching like a bunch of like history stuff about like Japanese heroes and like their origins of like Super Sentai and Kamen Rider and stuff. And then that show talks about that as well with the inclusion of Spider-Man. So it was a weird coincidence that was the first episode. But I was kind of there wanting to watch something kind of pop culture documentary based because I enjoyed the movies that made us, the toys that made us, all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was a good equivalent. So yeah, checked out the first episode of that as well, which I really enjoyed. And, of course, Loki, Bad Batch. Loki, I think, gave me a lot of what I was saying about last week in terms of what I kind of missed from the first episode was that real kind of like, oh, you know, we need to be invested in this now. And, yeah, that was quite the ending, and I think it really did signify this as like a now, you know, must-watch because it had such a good sort of cliffhanger ending. And it was kind of like that moment you have in a lot of TV shows, you know, the sort of pin drop moment, I think, which was really fun.
Yeah, I got to agree with you, Loki. I'm absolutely loving this show. I said last week I was hugely impressed with the premiere episode, and the second episode delivers even more, going deeper into these characters, exploring weirder and wackier things. And obviously that reveal at the end, which, you know, it's been on the internet now for a while, we can say, the reveal of Lady Loki, you know what I mean? Like, it's huge. And, you know, we kind of suspected we were going to get there, but the way it was done, it was just fantastic. And also, as I mentioned to you guys on the group chat, Bonnie Tyler at the minute is absolutely killing it with the royalties of holding up for a hero, having appeared on the second episode of Loki, the Masters of the Universe trailer, and the Guardians of the Galaxy video game trailer. She's raking it in at the minute. It's funny you brought up Marvel 616 as well, because I don't know if I did, but I'm pretty sure I told you months ago, I was like, you have to watch this because it's amazing. And that episode is great, but there's a few episodes in that they like sort of cover like the writers of Marvel or the artists, and there's also one episode about cosplaying. And I think it was the one about cosplaying that actually brought me to tears. Oh no, and there was also one about action figures as well. That one, you know, it just got right in the feels. And it's just, oh my God, I'm getting teared up thinking about it now. Like, just how they're expressing their love for the action figures, for cosplaying, what Marvel and these characters mean to them. Oh, it's so good. I highly recommend anyone to check out Marvel 616 on Disney+, because if you're a fan of Marvel, you will love it. It's just a joy to watch. And it's funny you also mentioned Toys That Made Us, because obviously I'm on the Masters of the Universe bandwagon at the moment. You know, we got the new show coming up very soon. I've got Holding Up for a Hero on repeat on my iPhone. But I also was like, oh, you know what? I'll watch the He-Man, the Toys That Made Us episode as well. So it was really good fun to revisit that, because that's a good one as well. And just seeing some of those toys, like I wasn't obviously there at the time of its peak. I got a lot of like older toys, like secondhand toys from like older relatives and stuff like that I played with. And I got some of the newer ones when sort of in the early 2000s when they did that wave. But it's just really interesting to see how toy companies work. And you think the movie business is hard. You try entering the toy business, man. There's a lot of sharks in there. And I remember them talking about who actually created the character He-Man. There's an ongoing battle, and no one's quite willing to admit who created what. So it's a lot of drama in the toy business at times.
Yeah, well, even similarly they did that high score as well. Like, it's just, even though, again, I enjoy the movies that make us, I think it's just because there's a kind of more natural progression to making a film. There is just, we write the script, we come up with the idea, it gets commissioned, we cast this person. Whereas I think the toys and video games are kind of like a untamed beast, if you will, in that they kind of just go, yeah, and let's just do it and just unleash it and then just see what happens. Whereas I guess movies are kind of made a bit more by committee, and there's a lot more people involved with it. Whereas like what's fascinating about like High Score and the Toys That Made Us is like a lot of them are these kind of labor of loves for a lot of people. Or like you said, it's very much a kind of franchise mentality of like, oh, well, it needs to have a TV show. And the reason the TV show exists is to sell the toys. And the reason that the toys exists is to promote the TV show. So it's this kind of weird conglomeration of stuff. And yeah, just very particular to a certain era as well. Like, again, if you watch like stories of like how 90s films or 80s, 70s, a lot of them are going to be quite similar to how you see the production of like films today even. Whereas again, there's something about toys and video games from like back in the day, if you want to say that, which is a lot different, and it's just got this like nostalgia and uniqueness to it, I guess, because they were kind of evolving industries, whereas like cinema has been around for like 100 years, whereas video games only really boomed during like the 80s and 90s, and I think that's what makes those kind of franchises a lot more interesting. And like I said, it developed, it was people in their basements, it was people like developing these things and like adding levels and just making them on their computers and that kind of stuff. So that's always the stuff that surprises me, is that like something like, I think it's like Miss Pac-Man or something, is it where they used to have arcade machines. And again, cinema's not changed. There's home video, there's the cinema releases, watching it on television. Was video games used to be arcades, and that was the only way you could play them. And they had a set amount of levels and nothing would change. And the fact that some students went along and took like Pac-Man and then like soldered together like extra pieces of chips or whatever to like make extra levels and was selling them to the arcades. And then Namco and Atari and all those kind of people went, excuse me, you are like taking our product and making money off it. And then eventually hired them. So it's like crazy stories like that, which tend to happen in like toys and video games, I find.
Yeah, and it is always around that era as well, particularly the 80s, because when I was flicking through the episodes, just looking at all the episode titles, I was thinking, you know what? The majority of all these toy lines came out in the 80s. Do you know what I mean? Or at least the early 90s, some of them. And I was just thinking, God, that must have been the pinnacle peak time for toys and for kids, because I remember even though I was a kid in the 90s, toys were still huge. Do you know what I mean? And also, especially leading up to the Star Wars prequels, there was that huge boom of Phantom Menace and stuff like that. So I've always really valued toys and seeing kids play with toys. But the 80s, man, those kids had it all. Like, obviously, with the Star Wars original trilogy, Motu, Ninja Turtles, loads, absolutely loads. It's crazy. To be a kid in that time must have been something. What a time. What a time. It's just last, before we go into the news, I'll just say it's a shame that kids don't quite have the experience we had with toys these days now. A lot of it is, iPads and apps and all that sort of thing, which is fine. That obviously has a lot of merits and advantages, but I can't help but think, you guys are missing out on these little molds of plastic that created a whole world for us.
whenever I think of people saying like, oh, well, they've got digital stuff now, like apps and iPads and all that kind of stuff, and in some ways we had that back in the day, but it was more your kind of like little teach you numbers thing that appeared on your screen, like television. And there was like a little crappy 2D green map, and it was just like, scatter across the map and then go and meet the ladybug and all this kind of stuff. Whereas now it'd be like this 3D animal or something, like taking you through an entire 3D world. Whereas like, so that's the biggest change in what's happened.
Go to Toy Story. We had something like Mr. Spell. Thank you, Mr. Spell.
Exactly. You're welcome.
Right. So yeah, let's get into the news then.
Tear up page 1. Run that photo instead. Headline: Spider-Man, hero or menace? Exclusive Daily Bugle photo.
So our first story is Andy Muschietti. He doesn't stop. He's relentless at the minute, dropping the images left, right, and center, as The Flash is currently in production right now in London. And we'll start with the official stuff first. Then we'll go into like the set pics and stuff for that. Now, normally we don't discuss leaked photos or on-set photos on this show. We like to keep it official. But I think with Andy Muschietti releasing his photos and these photos being all throughout the internet, I think it's hard not to talk about it. So first of all, we get our look at the Flash's new logo. Andy Muschietti dropped that on his Instagram. And we also get the logo and part of the costume of our new Supergirl, played by Sasha Gage. So before we get into the leaked stuff that we see, Dave, these images, the Flash logo and the Supergirl logo, do they interest you? Are they striking to you? Are you interested in this movie or where these characters are going to go with these new logos?
Yeah, I think for a project that's been in the pipeline for so long, like one, it's nice just to see it come to fruition now. You're like, oh, it's real. It's actually happening. It's, they're there on set. So one, that's good. It adds a bit more context to the whole multiverse kind of stuff that we've speculated about. So now again, it's not like the problems that we've had with Spider-Man, like, well, what is this movie? How many characters are there going to be? You can kind of in your head now go like, okay, we know the main players potentially, just because of those set photos. Obviously there might be a lot more elements that we're not seeing, but usually when you have those kind of photos, say like when years ago they had the leaked photos of the Suicide Squad, the David Ayer version, you could kind of get an idea of like, what characters we're dealing with, which members of the team would be following. They don't tend to be leaked set photos of supporting characters, really, do they? So I think it gives us a bit more context about what the film is going to be like and who we're dealing with, which I think is good. It's ramping up anticipation. It makes it feel like this film is now real, and it just gives you a bit more imagery and an idea of what kind of film it's going to be. And yeah, I think that it does make me more excited for it, because in terms of the Supergirl stuff, it makes me a lot more interested in this character, because I think in the past I haven't been too interested with her as a character, because I've not really liked the kind of cheerleader look they go with for her. I just don't find it very interesting, the fact that she is just this blonde bombshell Superman equivalent. I just don't think has ever really been that interesting, just because she just looks such a generic female version of a character. And I think maybe because we've seen her a lot, I think especially even in like the Justice League cartoons, I was always just like, what, she just wears a Superman t-shirt? Like how lazy is that? She doesn't even have like a costume per se. So I think that this goes to show of like why it's important to diversify the character and just make her own thing. So I think that this could definitely be an example of like Jason Momoa with Aquaman, or even Tony Stark, or a lot of the characters we've seen over on Marvel. This could actually be like a big step up for that character from what was originally a more smaller character within the comics. I might offend some people there, but I'm just saying that she's never been like a massive, crowd bringer. She's not had like big films. I know that she does have a film out there. I know that you had to endure it once. So I know that, that there's not a good word for that. So we haven't had like a big Supergirl movie that's earned $1 billion or anything. She's not had like a massive television show. She has had one, but it's a kind of CW stuff. So it just gets mixed in with all of that. So as I see this and I go, oh, that is its own character. She is her own thing. which I think is good, rather than it just being like, oh, it's just blonde Superman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. First of all, in regards to the film happening, I'm like you. I'm just like, yes, it's finally happening. Do you know what I mean? Because I've always had this sort of belief that it's not officially happening until they're in production. Because pre-production can be, years and years and years until, and even still, I go back to the Tim Burton Superman film. They were literally about to start shooting, and it got canned. Do you know what I mean? It can change quite like that. So
Spider-Man 4.
Spider-Man 4 and all that sort of other stories like that. So the fact that they're shooting, I'm like, okay, we're finally getting this movie now. And as for the logos, we discussed a few months ago when we covered DC Fandom. I was a fan of the new logo, taking a different direction from what Zack Snyder did. I wasn't huge on Barry Allen, the character, but then Zack Snyder's Justice League turned that around for me, so I'm now even more intrigued to see what Ezra Miller does with the character. I love that the suit is more comic accurate, you could say. Looks like more like a one piece, which would be cool. And I please hope it comes out of the ring. Please let it come out of the ring. That would be epic if they can do that.
Oh, he's got the ring, so it's bound to.
So Supergirl, yeah, I really like that they've gone for the red top above the S as well. And we'll go to the leaked photos. We see her in the full one-piece suit. Like, I really like that they've ditched the skirt. They obviously did that before in the Supergirl TV series. And Melissa Benoist, who does play the character wonderfully, has said, well, and I've always thought this as well, with any superheroine with a skirt, I've always said that's very impractical if you're flying around and punching people and stuff like that. And they even made a point of saying, yeah, it's just... We did it at the beginning to sort of honor the iconic look of Supergirl, but as the seasons have gone on, we've realized this is really impractical. Let's give her actual trousers or like a one piece. Way more practical. You can do all sorts of things. So I like that they're doing the same with Sasha Kaja. But even just the suit itself with the red on the top, the fact that Sasha Kaja is a Latina, that is a completely different look for the character that we've not seen before. And, she's got the short hair, the black hair, which is very different. We're used to seeing, as you said, Dave, a blonde bombshell for a sort of Supergirl look. So this seems like a really different and interesting perspective on the character. I also think it's interesting that the logo is pretty much the same design or within the same world or Krypton, you could say, as Henry Cavill's Superman. I found that quite interesting because I thought they were moving their way from that sort of stuff. But I don't know how they're going to if she's linked to Henry Cavill's Superman, I'm not too sure yet. It would be weird if she wasn't, considering it is the same logo. Because then I'm sort of thinking, well, what are you sort of doing here? Are you keeping Henry Cavill as a Superman or not? I don't know. If they wanted to make it a different Supergirl from this universe or this multiverse, whatever, I think, change up the logo a bit anyway. But whatever. And then we see Michael Keaton. He looks like Bruce Wayne. He's got the same hairstyle as he had in 89. Obviously, a few less hairs and completely grey now. But I got Batman Beyond vibes from him. That sort of older Bruce Wayne. So yeah, I'm excited for this, and I just can't wait for this movie. But for me, I'm really excited to see what they do with Supergirl and how they change the character. Because while I think, yes, I agree with you, she hasn't been in the forefront a lot, I do think the CW series has done a lot now to bring her more up into the forefront and into more fans' sort of psyches. And I think if they can keep following up with Wonder Woman, Birds of Prey, these superheroine films that DC, we haven't seen Black Widow yet, but DC seem to have an edge over Marvel at the minute. I think they should capitalize on this. And if this is successful, give her own solo film, I say.
And it also goes to show that their look is important because, again, while somebody could say, oh, well, just because she's got long blonde hair doesn't mean she can't be this and this type of character. But I think the history has shown us, and adaptations or even creations of certain characters goes to show that, at the end of the day, that's how we act as humans. You're not going to get, say, a punk girl or somebody who's a bit more tomboyish or more individual who's then just going to be walking around in pink and long blonde hair. I think the fact that she's got short hair, she has a costume which is, less feminine, doesn't have, like you said, impractical elements like a skirt. I think it just goes to show that if it was an actress playing that, and even if they wanted to make Supergirl more of a badass character, less of a kind of damsel, and, you know, less dumb blonde in a way, I suppose, you know, no offense to, again, blondes or anything like that. So when you are then a character who's got like this short hairstyle, which is like, you know, more like roughed up and everything like that, and you're not in this more like girly costume, you're going to feel like more of a different character. You're going to take on a different persona, which I think is important. So, and we've seen that already, you know, Captain Marvel, she works best, I think, in Endgame. Like, she had her short hair in that, and that makes her more of like a sort of more credible force. She doesn't look like a doll as much. And the same, so again, it's not so much even about hair color, I suppose, it's just the way that it's designed. You know, if you've got like a nice curly blonde hair, then you're like, well, that doesn't look realistic. Whereas when she's got the short crew cut sort of hair, then she looks like a soldier, and it's the same here. And we've seen it with Harley Quinn. You know, she had her hair like sort of chopped and turned a lot shorter for Birds of Prey, which kind of give her more of a tomboyish look. So I think that it sort of reinvents the character in that way. And I think the good thing about the costume is, again, I was a bit unsure when I saw just the photo the director released. But when you see it in those photos, I think it just strikes the right balance. I think there was a bit of concern. I think Tom said I was similar, that it might be look too similar to like Captain Marvel or somebody like Spider-Man. But I think it just has the right mix. I think that it looks different enough. It makes her individual. It doesn't look like she's just wearing Henry Cavill's suit. It's different enough. You've got the red. I like the fact that she hasn't got like red boots as well. I think that makes it quite different. And when she's sort of like holding her own in that photo where she's kind of looks like she's flying or something, or floating, it kind of just gives her like a more, you know, warrior kind of look in this, like this one jumpsuit, like a sort of flight suit, kind of makes her just more ethereal, I guess, rather than sort of looking like a soldier. And I think that looks cool. And I think there was some photos where you could see that she had a long cape, which I also think is important, because the short cape, again, I think just adds to the cheerleader look, whereas I think it's important that you can be like, no, the girl can have the long cape as well, and that adds to, like, you know, if you see her flying around, you see this big cape, you know, floating about the place, which Zack Snyder has obviously loved to do. He's like to have the very, like, wavy cape, and, you know, it sort of, like, flutters as he's coming down, and they usually do it in post. I think that will give you those Superman vibes when you see that as well, and I think it'll just add to that kind of, like, godly element of the character.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you that, Dave, like, because I didn't see those photos, so it's good that you pointed at that she is going to have a cape. But I was actually going to say, do you want her to have a cape or not? Because sometimes you do see them with the cape, practically, but a lot of the time, like you said, just do it digitally because it's easier, and you can also do some crazy shit with a digital cape that you can't do with a real cape. So I was going to ask, do you want a cape or not? You're pro cape, yeah, good. Yeah,
I'm going against Edna Mode here just because I think that it makes the character look like Superman. And, well, no, like I said, it's a part of the super people.
The super family.
You know, concept, you know. And, yeah, I just think that the short cape always kind of just undermines them. It makes them seem like more of a child, or, you know, like the less superior character. So, and I think that the long cape sort of just adds to the character and just makes them seem like they could stand alongside Superman as their fellow super character, rather than just like you have in the comics when you have, you know, Aqualad and, you know, someone junior and that kind of stuff. I've always felt like that about Supergirl. It was, I guess, because she's called Supergirl. It's not, because is there a Superwoman, or like, because people have maybe speculated about whether she will be Superwoman, which would also be interesting, because there's something about girl, lad, you know, that makes them then automatically the companion, you know. So
I was actually thinking as well, like, what iteration of Supergirl we're going to get. Like, are we going to get Kara, you know, which is the Supergirl we all know, you know, the one played by Melissa Benoist, and the main Supergirl, Superman's cousin, do you know what I mean? Or we're going to get this relatively new take on Supergirl created by Tom Taylor called Lara Lane Kent, which I sent in the group chat as well, one of the comic panels of this character, which she looks very much like what the character that Sasha Cash is looking like. She's got the red on top of the S. She's got the short black hair. So I think it'll be interesting to see what take they do go with it, if they do go for a left field choice like that, we go, oh, we're going to try this take on Supergirl. That would be interesting. Or if they are going for Kara and they're just changing up the look of Kara.
Personally, I prefer Kara because, again, I just think it would undermine the character if they're like, oh, I'm this person's daughter or child. So, again, it just undermines them already because they're standing on the shoes of their parent. But also, I'm not sure about, like, the history would go too well in their favor in the sense that she is a child of Lois and Clark, which are two white characters in the comics, which, you know, her being of a Latino background. Again, they could change the history, you know, we're dealing with multiverses and all that kind of stuff, but I think because at this stage we have seen Henry Cavill play Superman and we've seen Amy Adams play Lois Lane, I think it would just be a bit confusing for people, even if they don't want to accept that that's the canon version of Superman in this timeline or whatever. I think that, again, even if you look at the other versions of Lois and Clark, they're always two white people with black hair. So I think they would be better to sort of say, no, she's her own thing, and then you can just assume that her parents would have been of similar descent.
Yeah. Exciting stuff. You know, this film is under production now, well into it, so I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot more photos and hearing a lot more news as the weeks go by. So looking forward to that. But Dave, what's the next story we've got?
So interestingly, we've talked a lot about in the past release days, you know, what is the best time for these streaming services to be releasing their content. You can have a lot of stuff that's all bundled into one day on different services. You've got a lot of stuff to go through. And when they changed to Wednesdays with Loki, we were quite open to it. So now, apparently, they've made the decision to switch the premiere for new MCU series to Wednesdays as a official day for original series. And then films, etc., will be so more stick to the Friday release, which I think is an important move. So yeah, Disney Plus has now officially confirmed that all its original series programming will be shifting to that new weekly release date. This will include all of the streamers' original scripted, unscripted, and animated shows. So yeah, we're going to Wednesdays for all of those kind of originals, and then Fridays will be like our movie day. So what do you think of that change, Jake? Like I said, we've talked about it quite a few times before, you know, not necessarily saying, oh, I think they should do this, but we've talked about the problems of having stuff appear on one day and all the different services using the same day, etc.
Yeah, I think you said a couple of weeks ago you were looking at everything that was coming out on Disney Plus, and you were like, man, Fridays are just absolutely stacked. And that doesn't include everything coming out on Netflix and Prime and Apple TV Plus. And cinemas are back open, so we want to go to those.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of content at the minute.
And actually, this week, I just want to add to that is when the Bad Batch unveiled. I don't know if you noticed this, but I went on to Disney Plus, and the row of like new to Disney Plus, Bad Batch was like on the second row. I was like, this isn't very good. Your brand new episode is out, and there's so much that's released that day. The Bad Batch wasn't even like there at the front because there was so many other things they've added.
And that's Star Wars. Do you know what
yeah,
I mean?
exactly. So that shows what our problem is.
Yeah, it's just crazy. So I think this move, I'm not in two minds. I'd like to add something to it. Now, I like the decision. I think it's a very good decision. Because they have seen that with moving Loki to Wednesday, they've seen huge success with that. It was actually the most watched premiered episode of any show they've done so far. And I think a lot of it has to do with the Wednesday evenings. Now, Fridays now is becoming very chock-a-block, and it's not just, as I said, all the stuff on other streaming services. The world is reopening, you know. Cinemas are back opening, so people want to go to see their Friday night movies or Saturday night movies, the weekend, you know. We want to go see our friends. We want to go to barbecues. We're in summer now. We want to go to the pub. The football's on. You know, there's a lot going on at the minute that is... And also the fact that we've been kept inside for 14 months, you know. We just want to go outside and do shit. So it makes sense that they've gone, well, you know, let's move it to a Wednesday then, because people are less likely to go out of their house on a Wednesday evening than they are on a Friday or a Saturday. midweek. You're not going to be doing anything crazy. You've got work the next morning. So how about we'll just give you this show that you're watching, 1 hour episode. You can watch it with your other half or on your own, whatever you prefer, and just chill out for the evening before going to work the next day. I think it's a really good move. I do think, though, we're still going to get to a stage where we're going to have loads of Disney Plus shows all premiering at the same time, whether that be animated Star Wars stuff, live-action Star Wars stuff, Marvel stuff. Like, I think we're going to get to a point where, like, oh, so Boba Fett's out today, and so's Miss Marvel, and so's this. So all on the Wednesday. So I thank you from moving it from Friday so I can watch my movies at the weekend. But there's still a lot of shows going to be coming out on the Wednesday. I think it would be cool if they, as they're saying, we're adopting an old TV approach by releasing it weekly. We'll go even older. Do like, well, Monday nights is this, Tuesday nights is this, Wednesday nights is Loki, Thursday nights is Book of Boba Fett. Do you know what I mean? Spread it out a bit more, and that way you'll get more eyeballs on it on the day it drops.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's just an evolving situation. It's still an experimental element of streaming because it's still quite relatively new. Kind of similar, I suppose, to what we were talking about earlier with toys and video games. Maybe in a few years we'll get, all these conversations. Well, when we started Disney Plus, we didn't know what days to do. And then I came into the room and I said, guys, what about Wednesdays?
The streamers that made us.
Yeah, exactly. So I agree with you. I think that eventually then they'll start to go, well, Monday's Star Wars Day is Wednesday, Marvel Day, all that kind of stuff. And I think...
Monday-lorian, you could say?
Oh, we'll have a lawsuit on our hands, I think, then. So somehow I think they might have more money for lawyers than we will.
I think we'd lose so badly.
But, yeah, I think, like, I always think back to, again, the old days. Like, BBC used to do something called, like, Thursdays Are Funny, which was, like, a day in which they had, like, a bunch of, like, comedy and sketch programs would debut on that day. And it kind of just stuck in your head then. You were like, oh, Thursdays are funny. And, like... back in the days of like Nickelodeon and stuff, they were like, Fridays, like thank Nick it's Friday and all this kind of stuff. So you could even go back to those kind of days, and it might be a way of like, rather than just being, hey, here's the new Netflix show, because I think we've talked as well about like whether they're marketing these shows well enough, how they're, grabbing audiences, and maybe it shouldn't just be like, hey, here's Sweet Tooth, here's Loki, are you going to watch this? You're going to watch that? Because I think a lot of audiences and a lot of viewers will just kind of see it and be like, oh, cool, that's interesting. Where's this? When does it debut? Or, like if you give people a time and a day, then it just gives them an idea of it being more of an event. So I think if you start marketing things as, Wednesdays are Marvel days, if you have these like clever, marketing strategies around having, like they used to do, Thursdays are funny and thank Nick it's Friday and all those kind of stuff, then you can kind of create a built-in audience who know, oh, I know that there's always going to be something entertaining and funny on a Thursday because Thursdays are funny, or I know that there's going to be some funny stuff or, on Fridays because, it's thank Nick it's Friday. It's that kind of mentality. So even if you don't know what Marvel show is coming up, if you know the Wednesday is a Marvel day, then you can go on there and rest assured you'll find some form of Marvel content. So it might be a viewer who isn't really interested in animation and wouldn't have watched the What If series before, but because they're used to their Wednesday 7 o'clock Marvel appointment viewing, they might be like, hey, I'll give this a shot. So I think that's definitely something I think that will start to evolve and we'll see in the future. My only concern, I suppose, is just whether you're going to get a bit less water cooler talk. I think it's good for fans that you don't have this urgency. I think some people will feel if they haven't watched it on the Friday and they've missed it, then they miss out on the conversation that entire week, and then they just go, oh, I may as well wait for it all to release or something like that. Whereas I think Wednesdays does give you that chance to maybe have people kind of, they might watch it on the Thursday or the Friday, they'll catch up at some point, and whenever you see your friends or people at work, you'll talk to each other sometime within that weekly space. So I don't think there's that kind of like, oh, have you seen it this weekend? Oh, no, I haven't. Oh, well, speak to you in a few weeks' time kind of thing. I think there would still be that, oh, have you seen it last night? Oh, no, I didn't see it. But there would still be like a few days for you to sort of like catch up or then even still going into a new week, Monday or Tuesday, you could be like, oh, have you seen the new episode because you want to catch up for this Wednesday? Oh no, I'll check out tonight. I think there's less of that appointment, like that tight frame in what you got. Even though it's still a week to a week, it's just something about the week structure and the way that people work and the mentality of it, I think, which will make them feel a bit more relaxed. But I just don't know if that's going to take away from the kind of water cooler talk of like, oh my God, did you see what happened last night? Like, oh no, I usually watch that on a Sunday. And so you might lose a bit of that. Maybe that's my only concern.
As you said there, it's an experimental process, and one that is just continues to fascinate me, how these streaming services are thinking and working out these different strategies. We'll see where it goes in the future. So, as we talked about earlier, leaked photos. There's a lot going on these days. We didn't speak about a couple of weeks ago. There were some leaked photos of Shazam. The sequel's currently filming right now. We saw some leaked photos of Zachary Levi in the new suit. But the director, David F. Sandberg, was like, you know what? I'm tired of all these leaked photos getting out. So he just released an official photo with the whole Marvel team all in their new outfits. An interesting detail is that the actress Grace Fulton, who played Mary in the first film, who only plays the non-superpowered version, is now all grown up, so she can play both versions, the non-superpowered version and Mary Marvel, within the new costume and stuff like that. So Dave, I go to you first. What do you make of these new costumes? They look badass to me, and I could even say a little bit darker.
Yeah, I didn't notice that with... Yeah, I thought that there was something different about her. And yeah, so I guess that's good for the actress who plays her as a kid, but not so good for the actress who played her when she was grown up. But again, I suppose you can't have bad feelings for like an actress progressing her career. But yeah, I think they look absolutely fantastic. I think that a lot of people had issues with the Shazam kind of rubbery, latexy kind of look of the first film. And it didn't like look like it was completely on Zachary Levi's body, and you had similar kind of look to the other characters. As good as it was to see them all there at the end of the film, and it was fun, it kind of did still look like they were all kind of dressed up in these muscle suits, and it didn't quite fit them. Whereas here, it looks like they really made the effort to go like, no, this is like, they are buff underneath here. This is, you know, on their skin. This is a real suit, kind of still giving you that Man of Steel vibe again. So I think that while you said about it being odd that Supergirl's costume is potentially linked in with Henry Cavill's Superman, I think it's just the way that they're going with a lot of these suits is just they like that alien kind of realistic look to it. So I think that they're just making that uniform throughout all of their DC costumes. So yeah, I think that is really promising, that it looks more realistic. It looks... You know, it's Fury of the Gods, so I guess it kind of looks more ancient. And yeah, this just looks so cool. It's just, you know, there's not many other characters within comics or within media that look like this. You know, this team of superheroes who have like a uniform look. They've all got their different colors. I guess it's a kind of Power Rangers element to it. But still, it's, you know, the capes look really like, you know, it just looks like you grab that cape and you're like, oh, this feels nice. You know, it's like silk or something. They just look... They look so regal in them. They look like royalty. They really like stand out. They look unique. It looks really, really cool. And all of the actors just look like they're absolutely killing it. I think all of them just look like real heroes. And I think that each one of them is doing a fantastic job. Just within that one photo, I'm like just getting so much energy and idea of what they're going to be like in the film and what their characters are like, and the action almost. I think that because they're all, you know, like the one character's sort of like flexing in a way and other characters are kind of sort of like more leaned. I think it's just, yeah, just testament to like how much these actors are now settled in the role as well. Whereas again, I think the end of the first Shazam film, you could kind of tell it was still kind of a screen test almost, that they weren't quite there yet. Whereas I think here you can really tell that they are now at home. They feel like more of a family unit. And yeah, hopefully it doesn't have a knock-on, like a bad effect to when they're their younger versions. Because I'm still, you know, I've still never been sold on the whole, like, kid turns into, like, an adult. Because I think ultimately, usually, you know, unfortunately, adults are the better actors. and just that idea of like a kid becoming an adult is almost like Saturday morning cartoon kind of stuff. But at the same time, that almost is kind of the point, I guess, and the charm maybe of the first film. But when you see a photo like this, it kind of makes you think, oh, this is the best element. This is the stuff that works. This is really cool. So hopefully that doesn't almost like damage the time you get with them as younger versions of themselves. Depends how they play it. Like before, what was good in the first film is that they still seemed like they were the same kids. They didn't just become a different person all of a sudden. So I think that'll be interesting as well. But yeah, absolutely love them. Think they absolutely look really epic. Really cool. Bravo.
Yeah, nice one. I have to agree with you there. Like, these costumes, the first thing I thought was more money. The Warner Brothers were like, oh, we didn't expect this to do that well. Here's some more money to make the sequel. Like, make it like,
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, the first one, you could, as we spoke about, the costumes, you could tell cutting corners with the production budget and things like that. Special effects as well at times. They're like, oh, okay, you need to tighten up there a bit there. But here, seeing these guys in these new costumes, it also really invokes the title for me, Fury of the Gods. Like, first of all, because they do just look muscular and furious and ready to take on anything, and they just look like gods. Do you know what I mean? Especially, I can't remember his name, but the one who was green in the first film, but now he's got like it looks black or really, really dark green. He just looks...
Yeah, the photo I'm looking at now, it looks a lot more dark green. I can see, like, it depends which screen you view it on.
And I just think this is invoking a sort of maybe a darker storyline, you know, with a lot of these sort of trilogies and things like that. You know, the second chapter does take a darker turn, you could say. And I'm with you, though. I hope if they do want to go a bit more serious with the more superpowered beings and stuff like that, don't take away from the charm of when they're kids, because I think that's, for me anyway, the drawing factor of this film and what makes this film a family-friendly film for all to go see, because you have that kid element. It's what every kid wants to see, that they can just say this magic word, I have the power, you know, all that sort of stuff, then just invokes that spirit of just this one word and I can be a superhero, that sort of thing. And I think that's really important for kids to have. Sometimes when you see people like Wonder Woman, Batman, or Superman, it can be a bit like, you know, you do look at them as gods in the way and sort of unreachable pinnacles to get to. But with Shazam, I still think it invokes that really fun element of being a kid and wanting to be a superhero. So I don't keep that in the film, but I would like to see maybe a darker approach, a more serious storyline. And I think this costume invokes that. And I will say kudos to David S. Sandberg. They still should have done this earlier, so the original leaked photos didn't get seen. But I think more studios should be doing this now, because we're bound to get leaked photos, set photos, all these things that the studio doesn't want to see. Get ahead of all that. Go to a studio, take a couple of shots with these actors in their costumes, and release it to the public. So then the leaked photos, we don't see, people complain, look, the suit looks a bit wonky here, you know what I mean? When all the time it's like, well, these are stunt suits, so, you know, don't get your panties in a bunch because they need to be color graded and the special effects and all that. So a lot of people judge them harshly because they're looking at it from the set photo. But when you do something like this, you look at them in all their glory, you're like, wow, okay, they look amazing, I'm totally in for this.
Yeah, we got a podcast to run here, Hollywood. You know, give us more of this stuff for us to talk about. But yeah, I think it just builds excitement for it. Is again, they did it with the first Suicide Squad film. They had that group photo of them, which got people more excited, and the fact that made like $700 million, I think, was testament to that kind of, people saw the Joker and Harley, and yes, there's all sorts of moral reasons why that was wrong, that everyone started going out as that couple costume. But regardless, it still got people excited about, like, oh my God, I love the way the Harley looks. I want to go as her for Halloween, before the film had even come out. So I think that there's that element as well of building anticipation, building excitement, getting people teased what you can kind of expect without giving too much. Again, like a costume is, unless it is something like, Mjolnir in Cap, in Avengers, you don't want to see like Cap holding that, because that would have ruined the surprise. But as long as it's something that we kind of know that's going to be there, then it can prove really effective. And I think when you were saying about it's important that they have that element of the kids turning into the adults, I think this will be the testing moment for that for me. Whereas I felt that there was like a unique and charming element of the first film, but I'm still not sold on it as a premise, and I've sort of not gelled with it in terms of like from what I've seen of the comics and like in the animated stuff. So this will be the moment for me in which I'm like, right, this is their chance to see if I really am on board with this concept or not, if you can do it. Because like you said, you've got that expectations of a sequel to be darker and more serious and big up the story. So if you can do that at the same time as still making this work, then that's where it's going to be all in on this film for me, to whether you can do that successfully all at the same time.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone on that. I think there's plenty of people out there who struggle with the character of Shazam / the DC Captain Marvel. I just want to make that clear. Our very own comic book shogun, Tom Gapper, he has said himself he struggles with Shazam, but he's found the movie okay, and he struggles with him sometimes in the comics. So it is an obstacle for people to overcome. But yeah, it is an interesting one. Let's hope it does well. I really hope it does well, because I think considering the budget and considering the marketing and the hype around the first one, I thought the first one was actually quite good, and it did relatively well box office wise. So I hope people come out for this one. Well, looking forward to that, but we got a while to wait. As I said, that'll be July 2023. So a couple of years to go. That's it for the news stories for now. So we're just going to take a quick break, and we'll be back for the main topic.
It's okay, I'm not okay.
Each member is chosen for his or her own completely unique set of abilities.
I need to feel the raindrops on my head.
Hey guys, sorry I'm late. Had to go number 2.
Good to know.
Is this thing a dog?
A dog? What kind of dog do you think it is, mate?
I'm gonna go with Afghan Hound.
Oh my god, is it a werewolf?
Yo, they turned me into a werewolf! Yo, let me out!
Hey, he's not a werewolf, okay? He's a weasel. He's harmless. I mean, he's not harmless. He's killed 27 children, but, you know.
So we're back now, and we're going to be discussing our main topic. But I am in no position to discuss this topic because Dave is going to be all over this one. So, Dave, what is the big topic this week?
Well, we were just talking about Fury of the Gods, but we have to praise the gods right now because we have been graced with another trailer from the DC gods, from the man himself, Mr. James Gunn, and the cast of Suicide Squad, with a brand new trailer, which at the moment is labeled as early access trailer, do not share. And yeah, it's potentially given us our biggest glimpse at the story yet. Probably, along with the first trailer, this would be classed as like the official trailer, I think, going forward. I think this is definitely one you could see playing ahead of some of the big films we're going to get in the next few weeks in cinemas. It gives you our biggest glimpse of the characters and the team and the powers yet. Also has an exclusive new song along with it, and a lot of the jokes that we sort of expect, and not any repeats from the last trailer as well. So yeah, I absolutely loved this. I was so excited for it, and I am so excited for this film. This really does cement to me that it is my most anticipated film of the year. It's a fantastic trailer, loads of goodies to unpack, loads of story elements, so very fitting to be our main story of the week. So Jake, what are your thoughts on the Suicide Squad early access?
Well, first of all, I love the way... Well, I don't know if they did intend for this to happen, but the way it was marketed as a supposedly leaked trailer by the cast, that they were just like, hell, I'm just going to upload the trailer before I get the go-ahead from Warner Brothers. I don't know how intentional that was. Maybe an intern accidentally pressed upload a bit too early, and they somehow shifted it to be like, oh, they're the bad guys, you know, they leaked the trailer, so... They spun that very well if that was not the case. So I do like the way they market it, and, you know, early access, do not share. That's really fun. It just invokes a lot of James Gunn's style of humor and stuff. And yeah, as for the trailer, I'm totally on board with this. This seems like, for me, the ultimate summer blockbuster. Like, it's the very film I go to the cinema for during the summer. For the scale, the explosions, the dynamic chemistry between the cast, all the humor that's going along, the story threads that are really interesting. Oh, what's that element going to do? I am absolutely on board with this. James Gunn is going to give us one of the films of the year, I believe. I wouldn't say it's my most anticipated, but it's definitely up there. And as for the individual moments, like the humor is on point. Like the stuff with John Cena, Peacemaker, when they're in like the meeting room, and he's like, "Well, hang on a sec. Starfish is slang for butthole, so I just wanted to make sure that's not a connection." And like he just looks fantastic in it. Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn as ever is great. I really liked at the beginning that they focused on Idris Elba as Bloodsport. They're sort of really teeing him up to be one of the main characters. And I really like, they've got his daughter in there and stuff. The only slight worry I have regarding this is that he's being very teed up to be the main character, as I said, and sort of replace the Will Smith Deadshot character. And I do feel as if they are treading on very familiar ground here with the daughter element. And, Amanda Waller saying, "Well, I've got your daughter. If you do this for me, like, you'll be able to see her," and all that sort of stuff. I hope they don't tread similar beats. That's the only concern I have. Other than that, I really like the detail that they've bigged him up to be this really not to be trifled with character. The fact that he put Superman in the ICU with a kryptonite bullet immediately from the start of the trailer, like, okay, this guy's a badass, he means business. And then just everyone is incredible. Weasel, that joke with Pete Davidson, say, "Oh, you're a werewolf," and all that sort of stuff. It's just absolutely fantastic. This is why I go to the movies in the summer, to see these big, humorous action comedies that are just spectacle all around. But I think I've said enough, Dave. You're the guy I want to hear from, because this is way up your street. You haven't stopped talking about this film. James Gunn is... I feel as if he's like your type of filmmaker. The Guardians films have been some of your favorites within the MCU. So what do you make of this?
Yeah, the fact that David Dasmalchian, who plays Polka Dot Man, I think he had a interview with Xavi earlier this week, and the interviewer brought up the Suicide Squad because he's also appearing in Batman, isn't it? So I think in that interview he said that, James Gunn is such an inventive filmmaker. He brings such, a creative atmosphere to the set and to every project that he takes on. And I think, like you said, when I was reading that, I was just like, the points that he was bringing up, I was thinking, yeah, this is why James Gunn is so much my jam, because he's so inventive with everything that he does. It's such a different take, and he has such a distinct flavor, and it's kind of the same elements that I enjoy Matthew Vaughn for as well. I think that they kind of are in some ways from the same sort of wheelhouse in that respect. So I think that this trailer just speaks to that, and it just goes to show that the previous trailer wasn't a fluke, and they're not even repeating like any of the jokes. Like here you have very little King Shark, and you don't have as like much Rick Flag. So it goes to show that there's a lot to unpack in this film, and they're not relying just on those 3 or 4 jokes, which a lot of trailers can do, I think, a lot of the time, in which they're just showing you the same moments. Here, you get very little of the same. You do have the typical shots of like Harley with the flowers behind her, and some stuff of, them leaping from buildings and all that kind of stuff. But largely, it's all, brand new stuff. So I think that is, a good early sign. And yeah, I agree with you. I think it looks like, the ultimate kind of summer blockbuster. Very fun, very ridiculous. Has to be seen on the big screen. And I think that is, again, one of my worries is that, we've had a film like In the Heights, which some people have said that maybe is underperformed because of, the fact that it's on HBO Max. Some people disagree. I don't know. I kind of fall somewhere in between. I think that it's a mixture of things. But I do think HBO Max is an element of it. When you're talking about something like a musical or something, people go, well, do I need to see that on the big screen? And I think with something like Godzilla vs. Kong, people clearly went like, no, I need to see this on the big screen. So I think that there's still an element of that, thankfully, here with Suicide Squad, in which people, even though they've got the option, will feel that they have to go watch it on the big screen. But I do still worry about that element of just too much of it being spoiled online, too many clips, too much of this kind of like, oh, I can just watch it at home, especially as we've already talked about, it's going to be summer, people are going to have holiday plans, they're going out, they might just think, oh, you know what, it's easier just to kind of like chuck it on, I can just watch it on my phone on the way to work or something like that. So I hope that doesn't harm it, but I also just think that regardless of whether it affects its success or not, it just shows that it should be a theatrical experience. It's like the argument with Dune is like, no, you shouldn't even have the option. Like, this is how you watch this film. This is an exclusive theater experience, which I think is important. So I think that's my main issue with that side of things. But yeah, I also had the same feelings with you in terms of the Idris Elba stuff. I felt that like, oh, this seems like we're treading similar territory. I especially didn't like that stuff in the first Suicide Squad film because I felt that it was kind of bigging up the family-friendly image of Will Smith, so then you almost rob Deadshot of the image of being a criminal. They were like, no, we can't have Will Smith be a criminal, so we're going to have to make him sympathetic in some way or form because it's Will Smith, which I think that really harmed that film and that character. Whereas I think luckily here, it seems like you can tell the differences in it, in a director like James Gunn, in which like he might actually make them look even worse for the David Ayer film in saying, well, if you want to do that story, here's how to do it right. Because here, you don't have like a little 8-year-old girl. You have like a very realistic looking daughter who, looks like she is so brought up, maybe on the streets. She's so like very realistic in terms of like asking for stuff from her father. She's like a teenager. Just seems like a more like diverse and realistic depiction of the character, and it plays to Idris Elba's strengths, which again, they did that with Deadshot. They're playing to Will Smith's strengths, but it was a disservice to the character he was playing. Whereas here, I think again, it's kind of like where people have said, oh, I think Idris Elba should be the next James Bond. I've never agreed with that because I think he's just too much of that kind of like rough and ready character. So that's why I think that he perfectly suits this character here. So it's playing to his strengths in a good way. And I think that without knowing too much about Bloodsport, I think that seems to go with the vibe that they're going for with that character. If he is this kind of mercenary, more like violent character. And like you said, the fact that you say that thing about Superman right at the beginning maybe kind of laugh in my head. I was thinking, is this how they get Henry Cavill out of the DCEU? Like, oh yeah, he's been shot, he's in a coma now, sorry. Yeah, I think that would be amusing anyway. But yeah, and then apart from that, like I said, it's all just the usual stuff. I love all the cast members that we're seeing here. I think that, I'll say that I think Margot Robbie has grown as Harley Quinn. I think that she's always been great. It was a bit iffy on her in the first Suicide Squad film, but here, you can just see that she is so comfortable in the character and that she's just nailing it with everything. That joke when she comes on the helicopter, I just loved that. Like, sorry, just go for a number 2, which in any other circumstances, you'd be like, oh, God, that's a bit of a stupid joke. But she makes it work.
Sorry to interrupt, Dave, but I think a lot of it has to be down to the director she's working with as well.
Yeah, they've said this combination is great.
That's what James Gunn has said himself, that Margot Robbie is the best actor he has ever worked with. And I think you can really see that in the trailers. And like, I've been a fan of Margot Robbie as the character of Harley Quinn, but you can't deny that James Gunn is probably the best director she's worked with as with the character.
Yeah, and I love the Weasel stuff. I love that theme that just his brother seems to play like all the like animal characters in his like blockbuster films. Weasel is exactly what I wanted him to be. I was kind of like, oh, we don't want to have this like weird talking animal walking around with them, but like, no, he literally is just like this weird like runt animal that's just like making noise and kind of like popping his eyes out weirdly. Like, I don't know, it just seems like he's just tagged along. He's like he's like a disgusting Jar Jar Binks or something who doesn't talk. He's not there for a reason. He kind of just like jumped on board and they're just like, okay.
Who killed 27 children.
So yeah, just Margot Robbie, like, oh, is he like a werewolf and all that kind of stuff. So again, it just shows that there's so many, like a lot of James Gunn films, that there's just like iconic moment after iconic moment after iconic moment, rather than just like playing all around like these 3 or 4 moments. It reminds me of, again, Guardians of the Galaxy, in which you know, like, oh, why would I put my finger on his throat? And then you have like, you know, the breakout scene, and then you have, you know, in number 2 you have the like laughing at Quill when, you know, they sort of feeling each other's thoughts and all that kind of stuff. That there's all those iconic moments, and it goes to show that he's packing this film full of those moments again. Pete Davidson, I think, does an excellent job here as well. I think he's perfectly suited to the world of James Gunn and the way he reacts and everything. You know, he's a great actor, and I think that he's pulling it off here, and it looks fantastic. So that looks very fun. I think that he could work really well for the comedy. I love seeing Peter Capaldi, as I said before, and also Ratcatcher in this trailer. We finally get to see, like, rather than just the rats running around, she's got like a lot of rats on her shoulder and stuff, and they got like little jackets and stuff on, and I'm loving that. It just looks kind of cute, but also kind of deadly. Maybe you see like a bunch of rats like floating around in that shot of Harley when she's like underwater, and you can see the starfish and stuff in the background. So yeah, absolutely loving it. I'm so excited for this. Big shout out as well to the song which I mentioned earlier, which is called Rain, which is by or featuring Jesse Reyes, by Grandson apparently. And I think that that's quite exciting as well. I think that despite all the problems with Suicide Squad, the David Ayer version, they still had a pretty good soundtrack. Didn't work particularly well in the film. It was very much jukeboxy, kind of Snapchat the movie, kind of just dump this song on top of it. But they had a lot of good original songs on the soundtrack.
The movie.
Yeah, it was. It was edited by the people who made the trailer, so it's Snapchat the movie. Yeah, they had the 21 Pilots song. They had Imagine Dragons did a song. There was a load of good songs on that soundtrack, which are like made for the film, etc., which didn't so much play in the film. So this could be great if they do that as well. As we said before we recorded, James Gunn is great at having some really great songs in his films, but it also just adds to the flavor of Suicide Squad, of being this kind of like ragtag group, this kind of rock and roll, you know, like random assortment of like alternative characters. So it makes sense to kind of have then like an album with like a lot of like alternative musicians and a lot of like rock music and all that kind of stuff. So that experience makes me enjoy the film all the more. I think that's what kind of speaks to me about a lot of these films and why I get into them so much, is that it kind of gives me a lot of like places I can enjoy it. I can enjoy it in a lot of different levels. I'm listening to the music, watching the film, thinking about the action sequences, thinking about the actors. So yeah, lots to be excited about, and I can't wait. Just gonna have a big grin throughout this entire film. I feel like this entire trailer I was just watching with a grin on my face. I feel that watching the film itself in the cinema is going to be very much a similar experience.
I think I'll need to see it twice, because the first time I'll just be watching you all the time, just smiling. I'll just be like, hey, look at there's Dave. He's having a great time. So I'll need to see it again to actually watch the film. Like, a couple of other things I'd like to say is that I really like how they've edited these trailers, because I was kind of cautious, like with these type of films, like, who's going to die? Like, and you start to sometimes piece together the footage and you're like, well, these characters are not in this sort of area of the film and like that. But I think they've done a really good job of editing it. For me, I'm like, I still have no idea what the structure of this film is going to be. Like, I even have a funny feeling like Starro will be like at the beginning of the film or something like that. And it'll just be something ridiculous. Like, okay, we're going to open the film like that. So, yeah, I have no idea what the structure of this film is going to be. And I like that within the trailers, I still don't know who's going to die. And James Gunn have said a lot of people are going to die. Viola Davis as well looks incredible. I actually thought she was one of the stronger elements of the David Ayer Suicide Squad, so I'm glad that they brought her back. I think she really fits the role well of Amanda Waller. Like that interaction when Idris Elba's got like the knife to her and she's not phased at all. She's like, do you want to do this job or not? Brilliant. Yeah. Absolutely love her.
And the fact that the slogan to this film is, they're dying to save the world, I think, again, is perfect. Because like you said, a lot of people die. It's the Suicide Squad. Makes a lot of sense. Another maybe like criticism I have or like early worry is that some people said as well that this first Suicide Squad film didn't make sense in that it was this end of world event. Why were they sent to do it? Not, the Justice League or Superman or whoever. So again, I'm not sure, again, if we're going to get this element of where she says, look, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't absolutely need to. So if it is this end of world event again, it's like, why are you sending these guys? Usually again, they work best in when it's more like covert missions and that kind of stuff. But Again, we'll see. I think there's a lot of stuff in this trailer that suggests otherwise, in which you can see that they're in kind of like military bases and kind of, you know, shady areas. They're doing the kind of like sort of more heist kind of elements to it. So, you know, there definitely will be elements of that which will probably subvert that problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have good feelings about this film, and because of that date, this episode releases on a Thursday, so tomorrow will officially be 5 weeks away from the release of this film, Dave. So get ready.
Exciting.
Right, so that's it. That's the Suicide Squad trailer. Looking forward to that. So we're going to take another quick break before we go into our weekly pull list.
Well, after X-Men hit at the box office, all the studios started buying up every comic property they could get their dirty little hands on.
This week, I have the task of giving you guys the comics. I have the power. Tom is not here. So, and I haven't even disclosed with Tom what comics I'm going to be pulling this week for the show. So, I hope he approves of my choices. So, I'll start off with DC. Me being a huge Batman fan, I'm obviously going to be getting Detective Comics, and this is Detective Comics issue 1038. That is right. There's been 1038 comics in Detective Comics, which is absolutely insane. Huntress is in the fold again. Lady Clayface is here. Will the city collapse underneath itself? Who knows? But it's some really good stuff happening in Detective Comics, so check that out. Then we go to stay on DC, Infinite Frontier #1. So Infinite Frontier a few weeks ago started this new phase in DC where they basically said all the multiverses count. They're all canon, and it just confused things even more. And then after Dark Knight's Death Metal, everything was sort of put back where it belonged. Everything, like all the damage from all the crises was undone. And some of the heroes that we had thought had gone forever have returned. So this is a good place to jump on. Infinite Frontier #1. It's the next big event in DC. And we'll see what's going on with the multiverse. And with all this talk of multiverse stuff happening within movies and TV, this might be a good place to jump on to get your sort of head around how the multiverse works. So we're going to head over to Marvel now. So we've got Amazing Spider-Man issue 69. Nick Spencer continues his amazing run on Spider-Man with the Chameleon Conspiracy. As this carries on with Teresa Parker, they dig into uncover what the Chameleon Conspiracy is. And the next up from Marvel, this is Pride Month, and Tom shouted out a week or two ago, DC did a Pride issue. It is Marvel's turn, so this week we have Marvel Voices, Pride issue 1. So this is basically a special issue. It's a bit longer, it's 88 pages, and it's just going to have a lot of stories about all the LGBTQ characters within the Marvel Universe. So we're going to have stories about Wiccan and Hulkling, Iceman, Mystique, Destiny, Karma, and a few other characters. So really important. Representation matters, and if there's any month to pick this up, this is the month and this is the week. So check that out. And then for my indie pull, we're going to go with Image, and that is Sea of Stars issue 10. This is by Jason Aaron, who is a very popular writer among the Marvel universe with his work on Thor. But he's got this really cute but also epic father-son space adventure story going on at Image called Sea of Stars. So this is the end of the second arc, issue 10. So you can pick this up. If you love it, go check out the other issues. There's not that many to pick up. So I'll just read that off again. So with DC, we got Detective Comics issue 1038, Infinite Frontier issue #1, Amazing Spider-Man issue 69, Marvel Voices Pride issue 1, and Sea of Stars issue 10. So those are the 5 comics for you guys to be checking out this week. But Dave, any of those pulls catch your eye?
I think the indie one sounds the most interesting, actually. I really like that name, Sea of Stars. It's like really kind of sounds like something I would have like sort of come up with. It kind of sounds like my jam. I like the idea of it, of him being a swimmer and the Leviathan and all that kind of stuff. It sounds really cool. Obviously, Spider-Man is always great, especially when you got something like the Chameleon, who I guess is kind of like a more underused villain. And when you're mentioning the Marvel Voices, the Pride stuff, I know. To me, is it almost as if like Marvel does have maybe more LGBT characters than DC, or at least well-known ones. I think when you mention some of those characters, I'm a bit more like, yes, whereas like the DC ones, I'm like, oh, who are they? So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just my Marvel bias, but it just seems that they do have a few more well-known LGBT characters. Not to say that you should pick up one or the over the other, but maybe they've just done a better job, so maybe Marvel is the best route to go with in terms of that.
Well, I would say pick both of them up if you can. But yeah, no, I would agree with you. I would say in terms of like bigger characters that like in the forefront of people's minds, I would say Marvel do have the, Wiccan, Hulkling, Iceman, Mystique, all very big characters within the Marvel universe compared to some of the others that DC have, which is, Alan Scott, who is popular but is not as popular as some of the other Green Lanterns, Kate Kane, which is Batwoman, popular but still obviously not as popular as some of the other members of the Bat family. So yeah, I would say that Marvel do have the bigger characters who represent within the LGBTQ plus community.
Hopefully Tom does approve, so then, of your picks, taking over that mantle, because, he should brace himself for maybe when I do it next week, and I'm like, this week I recommend the Beano, issue 579.
They're still going. They're still going.
Simpsons comic, issue 500.
Right, so yeah, let's get your comics. As I say every week, support your local comic book stores we're getting back out there, getting back into the world, seeing movies in the theaters, buying comics from the comic book stores, and just general being outside with your friends and family. So, as always, thank you everyone for listening to this episode. We appreciate people coming on board every week, listening to us geek out and discussing all this crazy stuff. But Dave, where can the people find you and catch up with what you got going?
Yeah, you can catch me on Twitter at David Osgar, Osgar. That's where I put a lot of interesting tweets about what I'm watching, what I'm doing, what I'm observing, such as my idea for a new sitcom featuring Mothra, in which she is the mother of 2 teenage children, and that's just the sitcom. It's just that they get into scrapes, and Mothra is just their giant moth mum, but she just is just a mother. Like there's nothing else to it, and I just want people's opinions on what I should name this. I need some sort of like goofy sitcom name. I was kind of trying to think of like a play on like 2.5 Men, like 2.5 Moths or something, but I was like,
2.5
that didn't
moths.
quite make sense because there's only one. So, chuck me your ideas. Also, if you go onto freshtakehub.com at the moment, I've got an article up about the return of cinema. I got a few more posts and articles in the pipeline. So if you are loving the vibes of being back in the cinema, I talk there about, the experiences of watching things like Quiet Place 2 and having films like In the Heights, etc., and even F9 to a degree, all coming out and having that wonderful return to the theatrical experience and why it's important. So go check that out.
And also ask the question, will No Time to Die ever come out?
Ask the question, will Dave go and watch Fast 9 just to see the preview of Jurassic World and then just walk out?
No, you will stay for Fast Cars and Family, Dave. Come on now.
I will sit there watching a film I've not watched any of the predecessors, bar maybe the first 3 years and years ago, and have no idea what's happening. But then feel that I probably don't need to know what's happening.
I was going to say, I don't think you need to just go in, have a blast. No. You know what I mean? Get your popcorn, get your large drink, and just have a blast. Yeah, you can also find me on the socials. I'm on Twitter at SweatyJake, and you can also catch me on Letterboxd at Jake Hart, where I'm discussing film and writing my reviews, and you can see all my hot takes. And as for the show, we're also on Twitter at Cowls Masks, and we're also on Facebook at Cowls and Masks. And if you're using Anchor, Spotify, Apple, or Google, whatever you use to listen to us, subscribe and follow us on there. And if you're on Apple, leave us a rating and a review, as it all helps us go up in the rankings. So thank you all for listening. We'll see you all next week. Stay safe, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.